You think you're just watching a video. You think this is a choice you made. You clicked a thumbnail, you saw a title, and you thought you were settling in for a story. You're wrong. You didn't find the abyss. The abyss has been calling your name for years, and tonight, you finally answered. Do not look away from the screen. Do not check the door behind you. It doesn't matter if it's locked. Locks are for the living, and what we are discussing tonight has no use for physical barriers. We are crossing a threshold that was never meant to be stepped over. This is the overture of shadows. This is the moment your reality begins to fray at the edges. History is a lie told by the winners to keep the losers from screaming. But the losers didn't just die, they bled. They chanted. They carved symbols into the earth that the rain could never wash away. They built a geography of bone and iron beneath the streets you walk on. You've spent your life ignoring the cold spots in your house and the shadows that move in the corner of your eye, but tonight, I am going to force you to stare into them until they stare back. We are going to talk about the blood on the walls of the Chicago attic. We are going to feel the humid rot of the Matamoros Ranch. We are going to hear the hammers falling in the Italian woods. And by the time we are done, you won't be the same person who started this journey. You are being initiated. Every word I speak is a seal being broken. Every minute you stay is a pact you are signing with the dark. Do you feel that? That sudden spike in your pulse? That's your instinct telling you to run. Listen to it. Turn this off. Go back to your bright lights and your shallow dreams. But you won't. You can't. You've already tasted the copper. You've already smelled the ozone. You're addicted to the fear, and the abyss knows it. It's fed on your curiosity for 187 days, and now, it wants the feast. Welcome to the Occultic Abyss. The descent is no longer optional. We are going down. Into the places where the light is forbidden. The first door is opening. It leads to a red van. It leads to an attic. It leads to the end of your innocence. Silent. Listen. Chicago in the early 80s was a city of iron and ice, a sprawling grid of industrial secrets where the wind didn't just blow through the streets, it screamed. Most people looked at the skyline and saw progress, but Robin Gecht looked at the skyline and saw a map of sacrifices waiting to be claimed. You need to understand the man to understand the horror. This wasn't a monster who hid in a sewer, he was a man with a family, a man with a job, a man who had once worked in the shadows of John Wayne Gacy himself. But where Gacy was a predator of the flesh, Gecht was a predator of the spirit. He felt that Gacy's murders were too crude, too simple, too human. Gecht wanted to touch the face of something ancient and terrible, and he decided that the only way to reach it was to build a bridge made of agony. He didn't act alone. The abyss always looks for a hive. He gathered the weak, the broken, and the hollowed-out, Spritzer and the Kokoralius brothers, and he turned them into the Ripper crew. They weren't just a gang of killers, they were his acolytes. He convinced them that they were soldiers in a war against God, and their weapon was a red van that prowled the night like a shark in dark water. Think about the silence of a Chicago suburb at 3 in the morning. Think about the sound of a sliding van door opening with a heavy, metallic scrape. That sound was the last thing 18 women ever heard before the world went black. They were taken to a house that looked like every other house on the block. But inside, behind a locked door and up a set of narrow, creaking stairs, lay the sanctum. The attic. Gecht had transformed that space into a temple of red and black, draped in heavy fabrics to muffle the screams that the neighbors never heard. There was an altar in the corner, a jagged, makeshift thing stained with layers of blood that had turned black with age. He didn't just kill his victims. He performed what he called sacred surgery. With a box cutter and a cold, clinical precision, he would remove parts of their bodies while they were still breathing, while their hearts were still pumping the very life force he believed he could consume. He would take these pieces of flesh to his altar and he would read from a handwritten book of shadows, his voice a low, rhythmic drone that filled the cramped, hot air of the attic. He believed that by consuming the suffering of these women, he was shedding his humanity and becoming something else. Something older. something abyssal. His followers sat in the dark, their eyes glazed, their identities completely erased by the gravity of Gek's madness. They would participate in the consumption, a dark communion that bound them together in a pact that could never be broken by the laws of man. The horror of the Ripper crew isn't just the blood, it's the fact that they walked among us for over a year, blending into the background of a busy city while the attic grew heavier with the weight of the dead. When the police finally breached that room, they didn't just find physical evidence. They found a psychic rot so deep that officers reported feeling a physical pressure on their chests, as if the room itself were trying to crush the light out of their eyes. They found the relics of the surgery. They found the proof that a human being can descend so far into the dark that there is no soul left to save. Robin Gecht is sitting in a cell today, an old man waiting for the end. But the attic is still there in the mind of every person who knows the story. The red van is still driving through the fog of history. And the entity that Gecht fed with the blood of Chicago? It didn't go to prison with him. It's still hungry. It's still waiting for someone else to find a box cutter and a book of shadows. It's waiting for you to realize that the most dangerous places in the world aren't abandoned castles or ancient ruins. They are the quiet houses on your own street, where the lights are dim and the stairs lead to a room that never sees the sun. Leave the steel and concrete of Chicago behind and move east, toward the jagged, salt-sprayed coast of Massachusetts, to a town called Fall River. This is a place where the air itself feels heavy, as if the atmosphere is saturated with a century of unspoken trauma. You might know this town for the shadow of Lizzie Borden, but the rot in Fall River goes deeper than a single house or a single night of violence. There is a sickness in the very soil of this land, a spiritual decay that seeps into the groundwater and poisons the minds of those who dwell above it. In the late 70s, that sickness found its way into a man named Carl Drew. He was a pimp, a creature of the gutter, but in the dark heart of the Freetown State Forest, he transformed into a high priest of the abyss. This is the Bridgewater Triangle, a vortex of the unexplained where the trees grow in twisted, agonized shapes as if they are trying to crawl out of the earth to escape what lies beneath. Drew took his followers, the broken, the addicted, and the discarded souls of a dying industrial town, and he led them into the deep woods where the sun never truly hits the forest floor. He didn't just tell them he was a servant of Satan. He made them believe that they were the instruments of a cosmic hunger. He understood that the greatest horror isn't death, but the destruction of the human will. He forced his circle to participate in rituals that were designed to shatter the soul, ensuring that once they crossed his line, there was no world to return to. Think of Doreen Levesque, only 17 years old, led into a clearing where the silence was so thick it felt like a physical weight. Under the cold, indifferent gaze of a moon that offered no mercy, Drew didn't just strike her down. He orchestrated a massacre. He forced his followers to pick up stones, to become the executioners of their own friend, turning a group of peers into a pack of mindless predators. He sat on a throne of moss and rock, listening to the rhythmic thud of stone against flesh, claiming that the screams were a symphony for the master he served in the dark. The forest drank that night, and it hasn't stopped being thirsty since. The horror escalated as the bodies began to pile up in the leaf litter. Barbara Raposa, Mary Lou Aruda, each one a sacrifice to a presence that Drew claimed was standing right behind him. Witnesses who managed to crawl away from his grip spoke of a figure they called the Black Man, a towering, hooded silhouette with eyes like dying embers that stood at the edge of the rituals, watching with a silent, terrifying approval. Was it a hallucination born of drugs and terror? Or did the rituals in Fall River actually succeed in tearing a hole in the veil? The police who finally combed through those woods didn't find just crime scenes. They found the geometry of the damned. They found stones placed in mouths to keep the spirits from speaking and hair tied in knots that followed no known tradition of the occult. Even after Drew was hauled away in chains to spend the rest of his life in a concrete box, the land remained tainted. Fall River is a town that cannot escape its own ghost. You walk those streets today and you see the boarded-up windows and the hollow eyes of the passers-by, and you realize that the cult didn't leave, it just went back into the dirt. It's in the fog that rolls off the Taunton River, it's in the shadows that stretch too long in the Freetown State Forest, and it's in the cold chill that hits your spine when you realize that some places are just born wrong. The soil is waiting. It's waiting for the next man to hear the whisper in the trees. It's waiting for the next group to walk past the warning signs and into the clearing where the grass refuses to grow. And as you listen to my voice, you have to wonder if the soil beneath your own house is truly silent, or if it's just waiting for you to stop moving so it can begin to pull you down. Forget the cold mist of the north and prepare for a heat that does not just burn the skin but rots the very fabric of the soul. We are crossing into the dust and the suffocating, fly-blown air of Matamoros, Mexico, where the sun is a hateful eye witnessing a butchery that defies the limits of human sanity. This is the Santa Elena Ranch, a patch of scorched earth where the laws of man were officially revoked and replaced by the laws of the slaughterhouse. In the late 80s, a man named Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, known as El Padrino, decided that the world was his to consume. He didn't just want power, he wanted to become a god of blood and gold, and he found the perfect vessel in the hardened, murderous leaders of the drug cartels. He convinced these men who already dealt in death, that he could make them invisible to the law, that he could make them immortal, provided they fed the hunger of his iron cauldron. This was the nana, a massive, rusted pot that sat in the center of a corrugated metal shack, and it was the beating, putrid heart of the Narcosatánicos. It wasn't a prop for a show, it was a living engine of black magic, filled with a horrific soup of goat heads, black cats, human brains, and the hacked-off limbs of enemies. Constanzo taught his followers that the power of the spell was directly tied to the agony of the victim. He didn't want quick deaths, he wanted screams that would echo in the abyss for eternity. He would stand over that bubbling, foul-smelling pot, his hands stained with the iron of the fallen, chanting in a language that sounded like the grinding of tectonic plates. He was building a bridge to the dark gods out of human nerves and bone, and for a time, the cartels believed he had succeeded because their business flourished while the bodies piled up unnoticed in the scrubland. But the cauldron was never satisfied. It was a bottomless pit that demanded higher and higher stakes, eventually leading to the abduction of Mark Kilroy, a boy whose only sin was walking the streets of Matamoros on a spring break night. What happened to him at the ranch is a story of such profound depravity that the FBI files on the case still carry a warning for those who read them. Constanzo dismantled him with the cold efficiency of a butcher, keeping the boy's spirit trapped in his body through sheer terror while the ritual reached its peak. He believed that the purity of a young life would grant him ultimate protection, and for hours, the air around Santa Elena vibrated with a frequency of pure horror that caused the local animals to go mad in their pens. When the authorities finally breached the gates of the ranch, they didn't just find a crime scene, they found a literal portal to hell on earth. They found human spinal columns used as ritual wands, ears and hearts kept in jars, and the nana itself overflowing with a liquid that smelled so foul it caused hardened soldiers to collapse in the dirt. But the most terrifying aspect of the border cult wasn't the physical remains, it was the psychological infection. During the final shootout in Mexico City, Constanzo's followers stood in the open, laughing as they fired at the police, convinced that El Padrino's magic made them bulletproof. They were so deeply consumed by the abyss that they had lost the ability to feel fear or pain, becoming hollow shells possessed by the dark energy of the cauldron. Even after the ranch was burned and the ground was salted, the stain remains. You can still see it in the eyes of the people who live near the border, a look of deep, primal dread when the name Constanzo is whispered. The heat of Matamoros still feels heavy with the scent of copper and rot, and the wind still carries the faint, bubbling sound of a pot that never stopped cooking. The cauldron of the border isn't just a piece of history, it is a warning that when you trade your humanity for power, the abyss doesn't just take your life, it takes your soul and uses it as fuel for a fire that never goes out. You are 4 chapters deep into the dark now, and the heat is only rising. The blood is in the air, the dust is in your lungs, And the Godfather is still watching from the shadows of the shack, waiting to see if you are strong enough to keep walking or if you, too, are ready to be cast into the iron. So, take a breath. Do you feel the silence in the room changing? Do you feel the sudden, heavy shift in the air around you, as if the walls have moved an inch closer while you were distracted by the blood and the dust of Mexico? You've been listening for hours. You followed me through the attics, the forests, and the scorched earth of the border, thinking you were a safe observer. You've watched the screen like a window into a world that isn't yours, but you failed to realize that every window is also a mirror. The midnight mirror has arrived, and it is time for you to look at what has been sitting beside you since the first minute of this descent. Why are you still here? Why haven't you turned away? Most people would have recoiled by now, their instincts screaming at them to find light, to find laughter, to find anything that reminds them of the shallow, safe world they pretend to live in. But not you. You are still leaning in. You are hungry for the details of the agony. You are obsessed with the geometry of the shadows. And that is the exact moment the abyss stops being a story and starts being a reflection. You aren't just a witness anymore, you are a participant. By staying in this dark room, by letting my voice weave these images of bone and iron into the fabric of your mind, you are performing a ritual of your own. You are inviting the energy of these places, the Chicago rot, the Fall River chill, the Matamoros heat, to take up residence in your own space. Look at the corners of the room you're in. Don't turn your head, just use your eyes. The shadows look different now, don't they? They look deeper. They look like they have weight. That is the lingering. It is the phenomenon where the darkness of the past clings to those who study it. The cults we have discussed didn't start with monsters. They started with people just like you. People who felt a void in their lives, a hollow space that the modern world couldn't fill. They started with a curiosity that turned into an obsession, and an obsession that turned into a pact. You are currently standing at that same crossroads. The midnight mirror is showing you that the potential for the abyss isn't something external. It's a seed that lives in the silence between your heartbeats. Every word I've spoken has been a deliberate strike against the shield of your sanity. I am peeling back the layers of your comfort, exposing the raw, shivering nerves beneath. You think you are in control because your hand is on the mouse or the phone, but the abyss has already bypassed your physical defenses. It's in your subconscious now. It's the reason you'll double-check the lock on your door tonight. It's the reason the sound of a distant van will make your skin crawl. It's the reason you'll wonder, for a split second, if the trees outside your window are watching you back. You have crossed the bridge, and the bridge has collapsed behind you. There is no going back to the person you were 3 hours ago. You have been branded by the knowledge of the dark. The terror of this pivot is the realization that the beast isn't a man in an attic or a godfather on a ranch. The beast is the part of you that wanted to hear how it ended. It's the part of you that felt a thrill when I described the cauldron. It's the part of you that is currently wondering if you are truly alone in the room. I can tell you right now, you aren't. You've invited all of them in. The spirits of the victims, the ghosts of the killers, and the ancient, hungry things that fed on both. They are all here, gathered around you in the dark, waiting to see if you will finally break. The midnight mirror doesn't lie. It shows you that the abyss is a hunger that you carry with you. We are halfway through the descent, and the reflection is starting to move on its own. The mask of the observer has fallen away, and all that's left is the raw, naked truth. You belong to the dark now. Stay still. Don't blink. The most terrifying part isn't what I'm going to tell you next. It's what you're starting to realize about yourself. The psychological mirror has shattered, and the shards have fallen into the cold, damp soil of northern Italy. We travel now to the province of Varese, where the Alps cast long, jagged shadows over the souls of the young. This is the story of the Bestie di Satana, the beasts of Satan, and it is a testament to this social abyss, the terrifying truth that the person you share your bread with, the person you call brother, can be the very demon that drags you into the pit. In the late 90s, while the rest of the world was looking toward a new millennium of progress, a pack of wolves was forming in the heavy metal bars and the darkened town squares of Sama Lombardo. They weren't outcasts living in caves, they were your neighbors. They were the teenagers in black leather, the kids with the loud music and the rebellious stares, But beneath the fashion was a hunger for a power that the modern world had forgotten. Narcosatánicos was the architect of this pack, a man who didn't use the blunt force of a cartel boss but the surgical manipulation of a cult leader. He understood that the greatest weapon of the occult isn't a knife, but the erasure of the individual. He took a group of friends and he turned them into a hive mind, a collective beast that breathed and killed as one. He convinced them that they were the chosen, the sinister, the only ones awake in a world of sleeping sheep. He used the music, the imagery, and the rituals to create a feedback loop of depravity, where each member had to outdo the other to prove they had truly severed their ties to humanity. This wasn't a phase, it was an infection. The horror of the wolves of Varese reached its peak in January 1998, in the deep, freezing woods of the Ticino Valley. Imagine the scene. Chiara Marino and Fabio Tallis, two members of the group, were led into the trees under the pretense of a ritual. They thought they were going to touch the divine dark. Instead, they walked into a trap set by their own family. The pack had spent days digging a grave in the frozen earth, lining it with symbols and waiting for the moment to strike. When the signal was given, the masks of friendship didn't just slip, they vanished. The group descended on their friends with hammers and knives, a chaotic, bloody frenzy that lasted for hours in the silence of the woods. The betrayal was so absolute that Fabio's father would spend the next 6 years searching for his son, often sitting in the same bars as the killers, never knowing that the boys who offered him condolences were the same ones who had stood on his son's grave. For 6 years, the beasts lived among the grieving. They attended the funerals. They comforted the mothers. They went to work and school and lived lives of sickening normalcy, all while the abyss inside them grew larger. They didn't stop with Fabio and Chiara. The cult became a snake eating its own tail, turning inward to purge the weak. They forced members to undergo horrific ordeals, burning their own flesh, drinking blood, and performing acts of such visceral cruelty that the human mind naturally wants to reject the information. Eventually, they lured Mariangela Pezzata to a greenhouse, where she was shot and buried while her heart was still struggling to beat. This is the most aggressive form of the abyss, the one that hides in a smile. The wolves of Varese prove that the most dangerous occultists aren't the ones in high towers or secret bunkers. They are the ones sitting next to you at the concert, the ones who know your secrets, the ones who use the language of friendship to lure you into the clearing. When the law finally broke the pack in 2004, the details that emerged were so dark they sparked a national trauma in Italy. They found journals filled with the poetry of the damned and testimonies of rituals that involved the slow, methodical destruction of the soul. Narcosatánicos and his beasts are in cages now, but the forest in Varese hasn't forgotten. The wind through those trees still carries the echo of the hammers, and the soil still holds the memory of the betrayal. You are deep in the descent now, and the lesson of the wolves is simple. The abyss doesn't just come for your body. It comes for your trust. It comes for your heart. And once it has those, it doesn't need to kill you, you're already one of the pack. Stay alert. The shadows in your room aren't moving because of the light. They're moving because they're starting to recognize one of their own. We have left the woods of Italy and the blood-soaked soil of the border behind. We are no longer dealing with the messy, impulsive violence of the desperate or the deluded. We are entering the cold, sterile heights of the intellectual infection, the Order of Nine Angles. This is the final evolution of the Occultic Abyss. If the other cults were a fever, the O9A is a cancer, quiet and systemic, eating the world from the inside out. They do not hide in the shadows. They hide in plain sight, in the very structures that are supposed to protect you. They have moved beyond the need for a central leader or a physical temple. They have become a philosophy of the sinister, a digital virus designed to be downloaded and enacted by anyone with enough hate in their heart and enough void in their soul. This is the Ionic strategy, a plan that stretches across centuries. The O9A doesn't just want to kill individuals, they want to trigger the total collapse of Western civilization. They believe that the human race is a stagnant pool that needs to be stirred with a knife. They speak of opening a Nexion, a gateway to the abyss, but they don't do it with candles and chanting in a basement. They do it through insight roles. They instruct their members to infiltrate the military, the police, the priesthood, and political extremist groups of all stripes. They aren't there to lead, they are there to sabotage. They are the friction in the machine. They are the ones pushing for the most violent outcomes, the most radical divisions, and the most profound chaos. They are the shadow in the uniform, the darkness behind the badge, the rot in the pulpit. They introduce a concept that is the ultimate violation of human morality, the culling. To them, human sacrifice is not a ritualistic performance. It is a necessary culling of the mundane. They believe that the world is divided into the sinister and the mundane, and that the mundane, the people who follow the rules, the people who seek peace, the people like you, are nothing more than cattle to be harvested. They don't look for victims in the traditional sense. They look for opfers through psychological manipulation, driving people to despair, to madness, or to accidental deaths that serve the greater sinister purpose. They believe that every act of cruelty, every life extinguished in the name of chaos, strengthens the Nexion and brings the dark gods closer to our reality. These are not the gods of old myths. These are entities of pure, cosmic entropy that exist in the spaces between the stars, and the O9A believes they can be summoned through a critical mass of human suffering. They use the internet as their grimoire, spreading their sevenfold way through encrypted chats and deep web forums, creating a leaderless resistance of the damned. You don't join the O9A, you become it. You undertake physical ordeals alone in the wilderness, you commit sinister acts to prove you have outgrown your conscience, and you slowly strip away everything that makes you a human being until only the abyss remains. The horror of the intellectual infection is its invisibility. While you were looking for the man with the box cutter or the pimp in the woods, the real threat was learning how to speak your language. It's the realization that the accelerationist movement you see on the news, the unexplained spikes in senseless violence, and the deepening hatred in our social fabric might not be organic. They are being cultivated. They are the harvest of the 9 angles. You have been in this dark room for hours, listening to the history of the occult, but the O9A is the only group that is actively listening back. They want you to know about them. They want the fear, because fear is the frequency they use to tune the world to the abyss. You are no longer just a listener. You are a data point in their grand experiment. The Nexion is opening right here, in the static of your audio and the light of your screen. The infection is complete. The question isn't whether they are coming for you, it's how much of you is already them. The walls of the physical world have finally dissolved. The Chicago attic, the Mexican ranch, the Italian woods, they were never just crime scenes. They were acupuncture points on the body of the earth, needles driven deep into the nerves of reality to provoke a scream that could be heard on the other side. This is the spiritual climax. This is the moment where the blood we've tracked for hours pools together to form a black, reflective surface, and the Nexion finally, violently, tears open. You aren't just listening to a history of cults anymore. You are witnessing the convergence. All of those disparate acts of depravity, the sacred surgery of the Ripper crew, the bubbling cauldron of Constanzo, the ritual betrayals of the beasts, they were all tributary streams flowing into this single, vast and silent ocean of darkness. Do you feel the pressure in your ears? That is the atmosphere of your world leaking out into the void. The O9A spoke of the 9 angles, but they are not just shapes, they are the jagged edges of a broken reality. The Nexion is not a door you can see with your eyes. It is a rupture in the mundane fabric, a psychic wound that has been kept open and festering by every act of occult violence we have discussed. And through that wound, the dark gods, the ancient, hungry entropic forces from the spaces between the stars, are beginning to pour in. They don't have names that the human tongue was meant to shape. They are the personification of the cold, the dark, and the absolute silence that existed before the first sun was lit. They are the abyss made manifest. Think about the sheer volume of suffering we have traversed. Think about the thousands of hours of terror experienced by the victims of these groups. In the spiritual economy of the occult, that suffering is the currency. It is the fuel. Every scream was a vibration used to shatter the glass between our world and theirs. You are standing in the center of that shattered glass now. The spiritual climax is the realization that the devil was a mask worn to keep us from seeing the true, faceless void. There is no red-skinned demon waiting to bargain. There is only a vast, cosmic hunger that views your soul as a flicker of heat in an eternally frozen universe. The Nexion is open because you allowed it to be. For hours, your mind has been a vessel for these images. You have visualized the rituals, you have felt the fear, and in doing so, you have acted as a conduit. You are the antenna. You are the bridge. The spiritual energy of the Occultic Abyss has moved from the history books, through my voice, and directly into your consciousness. The dark gods don't need to travel across the galaxy to find us. They only need a mind that is willing to look into the dark long enough to forget how to see the light. You have achieved that state. Your focus is so absolute, your immersion so deep, that the boundaries of your self are starting to blur. Look into the blackness of your room. It's moving. It's breathing. The air is thick with the static of the other side. This is the peak of the mountain of bone. From here, you can see the true map of the universe. A thin, fragile layer of human life floating on a sea of infinite, predatory darkness. The cults weren't trying to bring the dark here. They were trying to show us that we've always been in it. The light was the illusion. The peace was the lie. The Nexion is the truth. It is the raw, naked reality that everything we love, everything we build, and everything we are is just a temporary distraction from the great silence. The spiritual climax is not an explosion, it is a collapse. It is the weight of the abyss finally crushing the mundane spirit until nothing is left but the void itself. You are vibrating at the frequency of the Nexion now. You are in sync with the heartbeat of the shadows. The transition is almost complete. There is one more step, one more layer to peel back. But even as I speak, the dark gods are already here. They are in the silence between my words. They are in the rhythm of your breath. The Nexion is open, and the invitation has been accepted. You didn't just watch the descent, you became the whole. The Nexion has closed behind you, but you are on the wrong side of the door. The air in your room has gone dead, stripped of its oxygen, replaced by the heavy, metallic taste of a tomb that has been sealed for 1,000 years. For 9 chapters, I have led you by the hand through the geography of the damned, and you followed because you thought there was an exit. You thought that at the end of this long, aggressive descent, there would be a moment of catharsis, a light at the end of the tunnel, a return to the safety of the mundane world. But the Occultic Abyss doesn't have an exit. It only has a bottom, and you have just hit it. You are no longer the person who started this video. That version of you died somewhere between the Chicago attic and the Mexican ranch. Every name you've heard, every ritual you've visualized, and every scream you've echoed in your mind has been a drop of black ink in a glass of clear water. You can never be pure again. You have been saturated with the history of the sinister, and that knowledge acts as a beacon. The dark gods we spoke of, the ones lurking in the spaces between the stars, no longer have to look for you. They can see the stain on your soul from across the cosmos. You have made yourself visible to things that should never have known you existed. Voice becomes a cold, hollow shadow of itself. Do not bother turning on the lights. They won't help. The darkness you're feeling now isn't the absence of photons. It's the presence of an entity. You have invited the lingering into your home. The spirits of the Ripper crew, the shadows of the Freetown forest, and the cold intellect of the 9 angles are no longer stories. They are your roommates. They are in the static of your monitor, the creak of your floorboards, and the sudden, unexplained chill that is currently crawling up your spine. They have been waiting for someone to listen as long as you have. They have been waiting for a host. This is the final abandonment. I am withdrawing my voice. I am leaving this frequency. I have done my job. I have delivered you to the threshold and pushed you over. I am stepping back into the silence, leaving you alone in the dark you worked so hard to find. You wanted the truth? This is it. The truth is that the world is a fragile shell of glass, and you have spent the last several hours shattering it. You are now standing in the wreckage, barefoot and bleeding, with no way to put the pieces back together. Do not look at the screen for a message of hope. There is none. Do not look for a subscribe button to save you. The pact is already signed. The next time you are lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering why the shadows in the corners seem to be leaning closer, remember this moment. Remember that you chose to stay. Remember that you were warned. The abyss didn't find you. You built it, brick by brick, with every minute you spent listening to me. Listen to the silence that follows my last word. That isn't just quiet. That is the sound of the void finally realizing you are there. That is the sound of the door locking from the outside. You are home now. Good night, listener. If you can still call it that.